Hi everyone, Raphael Harry here, and you're listening to White Label American, a podcast where we hear stories from an immigrant or two, sometimes more. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today. Shout out to everybody on the front lines. Our workers in hospitals, delivery guys. We appreciate each and every one of you doing everything to help us during these times of the pandemic. Our teachers, shout out to all of you. And yeah, everyone who's making life a lot easier for those of us who have to stay at home. We always love each and every one of you. And for those of you civil rights activists, shout out to you also. Today's guest is Christopher Archevald. That's it, right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. But who shall go by Chris for this episode? He's a teacher, influencer, traveler, model. Yeah, we had to throw that in there. He's mostly based in Spain. He's lived in Pamplona, Seville, has roots in Puerto Rico, Brooklyn, originally from Brooklyn, New York, and has been mostly in Europe for the past 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Yep. And he's an interesting young man whose life, I don't know whose life has been, right from the first time I met him, I've just been blown away by this gentleman because he's someone who, by the time we dive into the episode, you get to know why. But he's a guy who, I just like him, and he stands out. He represents the good in people, and he represents the good in New York. And when people say New York is full of mean people, I'm like, you never met Chris before. You need to meet people like Chris. When you meet people like Chris, you understand why New York rocks, and New York is home to me. So, yeah, without much further ado, welcome Chris to the podcast today. So, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for that intro. That was a very good intro.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Thanks for joining us. So, how you doing today?
Yeah, very good. No problem, of course. I was really excited to come. I've been really excited, wanting to come for the past... Well, the first time you mentioned it, coming to this podcast to me was maybe 2 years ago or so.
Yeah, I was still cooking it up then.
Yeah.
So you were probably one of the first people that I brought this up to. And so it probably evolved from what I had in mind to when I became pretty much sure of what I was going to go with. And then I still reached out to you again, and then during the pandemic, I was like, okay, maybe I'll record with you while you were still over in Spain.
Yeah.
Then you finally came back home to New York, and I was like, all right.
Yeah. I mean, I was like, all right, well, man, I'm in Spain right now, so I can't come to the studio, obviously. Yeah. And then, when the pandemic hit, it became more and more apparent that I was going to be back in New York for the summer. So I said, no, let's do it, we can do it when I get back and stuff. And, I really want to visit the studio and everything. And yeah, here I am.
Well, I'm glad to have you here, and we're glad that you made it home safe and sound. Mm-hmm. So let's begin. So where were you born, and do you mind introducing us to your childhood?
Sure. So I was born in Brooklyn. So my parents are, my mom was born and raised in Brooklyn to Puerto Rican immigrants. My father was born and raised in the Bronx. It's also his grandparents were Puerto Rican immigrants. So I was born in Bensonhurst and lived there until I was about 5 years old. And then I moved to Orange County, New York, which is about an hour and a half drive north of the city. And then after 8 years or so, I moved back to Brooklyn and went right back to Bensonhurst. Went to high school in near Gravesend. And so I was there in Brooklyn the first few years, and I was really, really happy living upstate, a completely different environment, not really multicultural at all. Like, man, there was some, eventually there'd be more Latino kids and black kids and stuff like that, but obviously it'd be maybe 90% white, typical suburban place and stuff.
Yeah.
I had a good friend. Some of my family on my dad's side moved up there as well. Okay. So, yeah, we brought the Latino cultures and the whole village. We had the whole Latino community in the village, and then
when you feel like you were coming to invade.
Yeah,
an invasion. They come to take our land and change our lives.
I bet some people were thinking that. Right? Who are those guys? So I was there for a while. Obviously, like when Brooklyn, I have that much memories of Brooklyn. Except, when I was living upstate, I did come down to visit my mom's side of the family quite a bit. Because they stayed in Bensonhurst, and so I did experience a lot in New York City, and it wasn't that far away anyway. I mean, when you're a little kid, okay, an hour and a half feels like forever in the car, but then you as you get older, it's like, oh yeah, well, basically half there, half in New York and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay. So, with that being said, what's your favorite childhood memory?
My favorite childhood memory I would definitely say. I would definitely, I don't know if I could pick like one, obviously, but definitely I would say the family trips I would make with my mom's side of the family, especially we would go to Puerto Rico, probably once a year. When I was between the ages of like 5 and 12, we would go to Puerto Rico once a year. We have family there still. I remember going with my grandmother, who on my mom's side didn't speak, barely spoke any English.
Yeah.
And just... when you're little, you don't, you kind of really, you don't really even realize the language barrier. Obviously, when you're 5 or 6 years old, she just, you're just saying little things to her, and she's saying like little things back to you. And I remember there was one story I remember when I was like 6 or 7 that we were driving back to our hotel, and this is kind of a weird childhood memory, but I remember she really, really needed to go to the bathroom, and we arrived at our hotel. And she's like, I can't hold anymore. She just was yelling in Spanish for about 10 minutes, and I didn't understand anything what was going on at all. And she got out of the car and just started peeing all over in front of the hotel. And I was like, what's going on? I didn't understand what she was upset about or whatever until later they explained it to me, or I saw myself anyway. But yeah, there was like that language barrier, and just my grandmother hysterical and my family hysterical. And then she just jumped out of the car and just let it go. So in general, I wouldn't say that was my favorite childhood memory, but the trips in general, like to Puerto Rico and visiting the family, and just how different Puerto Rico is to here, and it's again like another language, another culture, and it's a really beautiful place. And then also we went on trips to like Boston or like Massachusetts and Pennsylvania and places like this, and so I got really close with my cousins and stuff like that. And even though I lived far away, I still got to see my family quite a bit. And then obviously when I was 14, my parents split up, and I moved back to Brooklyn and got to see them a lot.
Okay. So what stood out for you in Puerto Rico?
Something that stands out is just I've always been a huge fan of nature, even when I was a little kid. And it just, at least when you go outside of the city, when I was, like, I would just say when I was little, because you don't really think about urban life or stuff like that when you're little. You just, you're there. Here, we're at this house. But obviously, what stood out was the nature in the beginning. Obviously, the beaches are really beautiful. But the rainforest and trips into the mountains or visiting friends of my family that they live. I remember once they were like, I guess they were really well off, and they had a house up on a hill overlooking everything, and it was super cool. And to this day, I love these types of landscapes and stuff like that. So that stood out to me, how different it was. And then as I got older, then you start realizing the differences in culture that is completely different to the United States. It's, owned by the United States. It's a colony, whatever. Yeah. So it's owned by the United States, but it's, not the United States at all. It's more, it's probably closer to Mexico or some places like that than the United States, where, like, to New York or whatever. And so then you realize the differences in, the language and the differences in restaurants. There's a lot of more poverty, widespread poverty there and stuff like that. And so when I was like a teenager and went, you kind of notice that stuff, and you're like, whoa,
I get it.
Mm-hmm. I would say those were pretty big differences. I think I haven't been back since I was 15, and even in that age, I was, I could realize things more, but obviously I was still immature. So I definitely would like to go back at some point soon, so I can, live, and especially now, like music and stuff, which you kind of live in Spain because all the musicians are, all the music in Spain comes from Puerto Rico or Dominican Republic or something. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anytime we look back and we start seeing the moments in our lives when we started becoming aware of our environment, and we could separate when the awareness we had at certain points in time.
Yeah.
So pre-teens, the awareness, even if you were in a certain bracket where there was, maybe you were in a lower bracket in the economic scale, and you still weren't aware of certain things, and you still see the world from a certain viewpoint. But the older you got, then the more understanding, especially when the more you got exposed to information, then your understanding starts to change, and you're like, wow, okay, so at this point in time, this is what I saw only. So it was just this amount of information. This is all I could process, and then But I think one interestingly, the fact that you zeroed in on nature, the rainforest in Puerto Rico, I think that speaks to coming from New York and going there as a child, being part of your favorite memory. I think that speaks to something that a lot of the guests who've been on the podcast tend to zero in on for their favorite childhood memory. It doesn't have to be the same landscape, but majority of the favorite childhood memories tend to be something that relates to outdoors.
Yeah. I guess here, of course, here there's nothing, like, there's the park or whatever.
Yeah,
but you get to escape.
But it's people who were born overseas for the most part, or people who lived overseas, even if they were born here, but they tend to pick something that involves freedom.
Yeah.
Playing freely. So it's that space.
Yeah.
And that's what it represents to me. Like, they just had an unlimited amount of space, because if you look back on it, it's that space that nature represents.
Yeah.
So were you living by a river, or were you by a lake, or were you even if you were in a desert, you still had an unlimited amount of space, because to you as a child, it just seemed like a vast amount of space that you were just running through.
Yeah. And
then when you come back to, if you're in an urban area, the space seemed compressed.
Yeah.
And it's limited. Even if there were parks around, you can't see, the park seemed small.
Yeah.
But when you go into nature, it's like, wow, it's big. Because even in the city where I was born in Nigeria, there were like hills, plateaus around. And every time the memories that still come back to me now, it's like every time I went playing there, it's like, oh, it just seemed endless. I couldn't see the end, and it's like, wow, it just, you're running and running and running, and where does it end? It doesn't. You can't point to there. But I think most of us always process that without really realizing, and it's just that space and freedom, and then we now ended up in like an urban city, and it's like, oh, or even in the suburban. In the rural areas, it still feels like you're compressed somehow, because that space is gone. Yeah, you don't have that space anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, even like nowadays, I'm sure you're gonna ask later or whatever, but nowadays, like when I'm in Spain, for me, maybe my favorite thing is, one of my favorite things is just being out in the campo, which is the countryside, and there's just, in the south, it's just flat and nothing. And when the sun goes down, you can see like the purple skies and whatever. Or in the north, there's the mountains, like huge mountains, the Pyrenees and stuff.
Yeah.
So getting lost in that is one of my favorite things about Spain, and I always try as much as I can.
Well, I've heard about this on a different podcast, and a guest who I've had also on this podcast confirmed that Spanish apartments are smaller.
Yeah.
They're meant to get you out of the house anyways, just for you to come back and sleep still. I guess that also plays into your appreciation of the outdoors.
That's
as
it.
an adult too.
Including you just want to get out. Not just like nature, of course. And that's why everyone's outside drinking all the time. That's the point.
So the podcast where I first heard it on, I think it was a Spanish football podcast, and they were talking about how being in a lockdown was difficult because you couldn't go out.
Yeah.
So it became a problem for people in Spain.
Right.
But yeah, so anyway, let's move on. So you part of growing up for you was also dealing with a member of the family having a disability.
Yeah.
And so you ended up doing something which most of us don't really consider or take seriously, but you ended up learning sign language. When did you take what led to you taking those steps, or what pushed you to going that route?
Yeah. So my sister is deaf. She wasn't born deaf. She was living in Puerto Rico with my mom and my brother, and she got meningitis, and she eventually lost her hearing when she was about 8 years old. And then my family moved back to Brooklyn, and so obviously she had to learn sign language. And this is before I was born, because my sister is older than I. My sister is about 14 years older than I am. And so my mom took her to a school for the deaf, which is not that far from here, actually. It's on the Eastern Parkway. And and so obviously she spoke. Obviously my mom had to learn sign language, and she eventually became an assistant teacher at the same school. And so eventually I came along, and I would speak a little bit to my sister, or just like, try to talk to her with my lips or whatever, and just like for her to read my lips and she can understand and stuff. But really also what and I wanted to talk to her. What really pushed me was my mom working at this school that I really grew up around, because my mom would take me all the time to their Christmas shows or summer school parties or whatever like that.
Yeah.
And eventually she started taking me as like a kid when I was like 10 or 11 to like these camps they do for a week, like these sleepaway camps that they do for the school in a town about like 2 hours from here, and again like in north near where I used to live. And so I started to talk to the other kids, the deaf children that they would put me in the group with, and I actually become like really good friends with them, and I would just pick up the sign, or they would teach me sign language like this.
Oh wow.
It would never be I never took like a sign language class or anything. My mom would obviously help me as I because it's sign language isn't exactly like learning Spanish or Chinese, where you have to learn a different grammar system or new vocabulary. Luckily, it's just like a reflection of the language we speak.
Yeah.
And so it was easy to learn. It's easier to learn for kids and stuff. And I think, kids anywhere can learn it pretty easily if they, dedicate time to it and stuff and practice. And so I got to practice in these camps, or I would always volunteer in the school whenever I could. And eventually I started working there in summers. And so my sign language became very, very, very good. Unfortunately, I kind of lost it in the past few years living away in Spain and stuff. But even then, it comes back to you. Whenever I get to see my sister or talk to my sister, it comes back to me, and we can have fluent conversations now. Wow. And so it's really good. And of course, like, it is important to learn that, and to keep in mind that there are hearing impaired people in your city or your country or whatever, and you know there are moments when they have difficulty communicating to you in a store, or if there's someone is sick or something like that.
Yeah,
you know?
even in times of emergency.
Yeah.
I don't. It's not something that I have ever thought about. I don't think I considered that. A few times I've had to, even when I was in the military, and we were talking about scenarios about emergency response and all that. I don't think that ever crossed my mind.
Right.
Because as a part of our environmental hazardous coordinator, you had to talk about, you had to consider emergency response and all that. And you also had to consider civilian populations, and that didn't even cross my mind once or twice that I had to write a report or something like that about. So yeah, it's just apparently it's a blind spot for me that I just have to admit that it's So it's something that I have to make a mental note to keep in mind. So I have to ask: is there a difference between sign language in from America and outside America?
Yeah, every country has a different sign language. There's even, I'm sure it's very, sometimes you can see, especially now in this crisis, the president of Spain comes on and there's always that little box with the sign language interpreter. And sometimes you can see things that are really similar. Or I'm really into this German show called Dark. I don't know if you...
Yeah, I love Dark.
Dark is amazing. And then the girl, the daughter's deaf. And she, or the daughter, mother, whatever. And
in season 3, it flips.
So there were things that she said that were similar, like I think like world is something like that would usually be universal, probably like world, because you just make like a circle with your hands. But obviously a lot of things that involve letters would be different, because obviously water in English starts with W and water in Spanish starts with A or La, and so of course you can't do, those things won't make sense. And then obviously in England you use different words than in America, and so maybe it wouldn't make sense. Or we have different ways of looking at things, like I know the sign for England in American Sign Language is like a man holding a cane or something like this. And I don't think in England they would have a man holding their cane as like their sign. I would imagine it's something different. Because it's like our stereotype of English people being very posh and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't think English people are going to be like, yeah, we're really posh, so let's make a cane sign. So I don't think that's going to be, I don't think it would be the same. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on English or British Sign Language and stuff. So, but I'm pretty sure something like that would be different. It's just how we perceive things, like, or like Spanish or something is like, of course, in America or in the United States, we look at Spanish, like Latin American or Mexican or something.
Yes.
Whereas in Europe, Spanish has nothing to do with Latin America. It's only Spain, and, they're completely different places and completely different cultures and stuff. Yeah. So, things like that would make differences.
That's good to know. It's good to know. Little details matter.
Yeah, of course. It's something that, you don't really get to... It's like you said, you don't really notice it because it's, a blind person, for example, you would notice maybe because they have the sunglasses or they have the dog.
Yeah.
But, a deaf person, you wouldn't, a hearing impaired person, you wouldn't know until you actually tried to communicate with someone and then they just don't respond, or they like start to sign to you or something like that, or unless you see like a hearing aid. But even then, a lot of, they don't wear hearing aids all the time. So.
Yeah. Wow. That's wow, that's important. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. So, you have a Puerto Rican background.
Yeah.
And you can easily pass as black too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can easily pass as everything, because everyone has like an opinion of what I am. So
that's true too, because based on the American. The way America works, I'm pretty sure that people must have said you Iraqi or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Because I have friends who Yeah, like I was actually listening to one of them
Yeah.
on his podcast, and he was talking about somebody that say, "Oh, you know, from Afghanistan." I'm surprised, you know, from like he's Puerto Rican. He looks
Yeah.
pretty much Puerto Rican, to
Yeah.
me, but he has a lot of beards, and said someone just came up to him and was like, I'm pretty sure you're from Afghanistan," and
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, I don't even know how the person came up with that."
Yeah.
So, growing up for you. What was your identity? You know, did you go by your identity? You know, how early in life did you have that Puerto Rican identity? Was it the Afro Latino identity, or was it was an identity forced on you, or did you have to choose one, or what how did it work for you?
It's a good question, and it's something. You know, because when I was really little, when I was young, really young, I never thought about it that much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think, of course, especially when you're in, like I said, I was in that little town that's predominantly white. You don't really think about it. And I don't think my white friends thought about that much until we became 13 or 14, and it was not even that, and it wasn't even that, like, super into the culture, but it became some kind of street cred.
Yeah.
That being Puerto Rican, especially when you're a predominantly white place, that's like, oh man, you're Puerto Rican, that's cool, right? You know, like, because I always see like hip hop and all that stuff, and like even reggaeton was pretty big, starting around like 2005 and 2006, and on MTV everywhere and all this stuff, and it was like, oh, that's cool, you're Puerto Rican, whatever. So for me, I never ever thought about it like I love being Puerto Rican because I never grew up in Puerto Rico or anything like that, so I always just felt like a New Yorker, and it didn't really matter that much except for those like teenage years when I just wanted to be cool and have like some kind of little bit advantage in like, yeah, well, I'm Puerto Rican, and then, you know, you talk, but I never got super into the culture. I mean, I always appreciated it, of course, and I always appreciate my family and where they came from, especially my grandmother, and of course, like, I always remember, like, my family was listening to the music, Puerto Rican music, you know, and making Puerto Rican food and all that stuff. But part of it was I didn't speak Spanish growing up, so my identity was always like, I'm a New Yorker, or I'm an American or whatever, even though that's like, but but it is something.
Did you feel lost for? Did you feel like left out because you didn't speak Spanish?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, quite a bit actually, like a lot. But I did feel that way.
And did anyone, like, from your side of the family, did they rub that in your face?
Yeah. My mom's side, yeah. For example, my cousin would. You know, obviously I don't have any like serious problems with my cousin or anything because she's about the same age as I am. So, and she grew up speaking Spanish because her father is from Peru and he doesn't really speak that much English. So they spoke, you know, a lot of Spanish at home. And my brother also, you know, the same way. Because my brother and I have different fathers. Yeah. And so he would speak Spanish growing up, and he would always be listening to like reggaeton and stuff. I remember he used to take me to Sunset Park for a haircut, and he would just say, all right, go in and ask for a haircut. But like none of the barbers spoke English. so I would just be like, dos or something like that. And they would just be looking at me like, what the fuck? You know, like, what are you saying? And then he would come in and be like, oh, you know, like, or something like that, or whatever he would say. And so I did feel a disconnect there and stuff. Okay. And I think I, like, you know, was like, oh, yeah, I want to be Puerto Rican and cool and whatever. But then after a while, you know, when I got to, like, university and stuff, I stopped caring about that. And my father also feels the same way because he grew up not speaking Spanish. Because he's, like, third generation. You know, whatever, and I'm like fourth generation on my dad's side, so of course, you know. But I mean, there's a lot of people like that, and you realize that later. It's like, you know, like all Latino. Of course, you know, this is like an English-speaking country primarily, and so, and obviously, the irony is now that I've been living 5 years in a Spanish-speaking country. I probably better Spanish in every one of them now. So that's why I'm kind of looking forward to rubbing it in now. Because it's a bit of like, you realize you're like, come back and then and I don't mean like, okay, because Spain speaks proper, like, like England and English in England is proper. I mean, it's a weird Spanish. Like when you hear it now, it's like, okay, so they're saying like half the words in Spanish and half the words in English.
Yeah,
or it's
I've heard that too.
It's like, is this copy and paste, like, it's the grammar's English, but they're just using Spanish words, and I'm just like, nah, but this isn't Spanish. They're just speaking like, you're just saying, pero no me gusta to the supermarket, and it's like, well, Spain is bad. Pick one or the other, and so probably the biggest irony ever is this, like. But I remember also a couple of years ago, I was visiting my mom at Christmas time, and her cousin in Puerto Rico. We just never ever could speak to each other, and I didn't like her at all because I don't think she liked the fact that I couldn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And so I never got on well with her. And so, but then this time I was like, speaking Spanish to her, and she was like, the typical Latino thing is like, Dios te bendiga, Dios te bendiga, God bless you, you're speaking Spanish, God bless you. And I was like, yeah. But, so, yeah.
So it sounds like I don't speak my native tongue, Ijo. For different reasons. I never. The main one was I never got to learn. I was speaking other languages, which was easier for me to learn because I got taught that. And nobody ever thought to teach me my Ijo. So and then now it's like everybody attacks me for not speaking. The one that I wasn't taught.
Yeah.
And so it's like the people who like, well, you're an Ijo man, you don't speak. I'm like, how was he supposed to speak when first of all, I didn't grow up around my tribal, I didn't have kids from my tribe around me. I had kids from other tribes. So it was easy for me to pick their language. Excuse me. Because they spoke their language.
Yeah.
And if everybody was speaking other languages around me, then I could easily pick. As kids are sponges. So whatever is being spoken around them, they easily pick it. And then that's how they start. And that's one thing people fail to understand with languages.
Yeah.
But if you keep hitting them with certain languages at that age where they're just absorbing, they easily pick the languages and they run with it.
Yeah.
But if you say, okay, I just want the kid to magically learn this language that nobody is speaking to the kid, everybody in the house can speak the language. Like my family, like multiple people could speak different language. Like even the language I could speak as a kid, people in my house could speak it, but nobody spoke it to me.
Yeah.
So with time, I will lose those languages. And then it's like, more than 10 years later, I will find out, oh, this person can speak this one could. I'm like, why? You're acting like you all were worried about my English.
Yeah.
And that was what the focus was like, oh, he's speaking, because I think by the time I was like probably 5, 6, I was speaking 3 languages.
Right.
And they were like, oh, my accent was bad. So they used to beat me, my English. Why is he not speaking good English? I was going to be speaking English no matter what, because English was spoken everywhere. But my native tongue, nobody spoke it in the house.
No, it's not. Yeah.
So, but as an adult, then now as a teenager, I'm like, why don't you speak the language? Like, I never saw anyone speaking the language. Like, nobody spoke the language. It was only one of my grand aunts who, anytime she visited, she would try to teach me the language, and then she's gone for like a year or 2.
Yeah.
And then she shows up and she's trying to teach me 1 to 10 again, and then she's gone. And then nobody practices with me, and then when next will I see her again? So
exactly.
Yeah, so there are people like, when they see me, it's like, so that's their thing. They always like had something to rub, to lord over me.
Yeah.
Like, I am better than you because I can speak the language.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I felt bad for a long time, but now I'm like, well, I guess that's the only thing you can use over me. But hey, I got this experience over you too.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Eventually, as life goes, it's like, of course, you're gonna learn more stuff. And,
So.
Yeah.
All right. So before we move onto the professional side of things. Since you grew up mostly, you grew up in New York, in New York area.
Yeah.
Food. Let's dive into food.
Good.
So with Puerto Rico, New York, where does your heart? And then now you're a man of Spain, and you've been around Europe and all that. So where does your heart belong to when it comes to food?
I definitely, yeah, I mean, of course I love all of it, but yeah, I definitely love the food in Spain. The food in Spain is amazing. And so
You betrayed New York now. You sold out.
yeah, I think so, yeah.
We
But I don't know.
We can call De Blasio to deport this
But New
guy
York is
immediately.
everything. So New York is, of course, New York is like, I don't want to say that the food, of course, New York, a restaurant, any type of New York, you can find anything.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And so I don't mean like the food scene or whatever. I just mean like Spanish cuisine is probably the best I've tried of all the countries I've been.
Okay.
Maybe like Italy too is obviously like really amazing. But
In Italy?
yeah.
Okay. Well, Italian food is
It's amazing, yeah.
I think Italian food I've tried in other places, like even Italian food in Germany was amazing.
Yeah, of course. And so, I mean, of course, you can pick any restaurant in New York City, and of course, it would probably beat any other restaurant in the world. But, in terms of what a country offers cuisine, it's Spanish food is really, really good. It's really healthy. Big portions, and then it's throughout the day.
Yeah.
The eating style is also really good. You have a small breakfast in the morning, then a little snack, and then a huge lunch. And that menu del dia. I mean, you've been to Spain, right?
No.
No, you haven't been to Spain?
I was supposed to in 2009. Then I fell in love, and
That's That's fine.
I never made it.
Someday you have to go to catch a Real Madrid game or something like that. Even
I will. Actually, I have a friend in Madrid, a police officer who had agreed to host me and everything, and then I fell in love, and the trip got cancelled.
Yeah. There's always time, and then you have to go, right? You have to go to the Bernabeu.
I will,
because then you love Real Madrid.
I've kept postponing.
But it's I don't know, all different types of food depending on where you are.
Oh, the crazy thing, I fell in love with a Barcelona fan too. Yeah, I went on a different trip.
But that's good. That's good. It's
yeah.
Differences. Differences are always good.
Yeah, sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
There's certain differences I don't want to entertain.
Yeah. you know what I will say, in general too, that's something like I was saying before, in Spain, if you go to one part, Galicia, for example, which is way up in the northwest above Portugal, maybe the best seafood in the world. And then up north is a lot of steak and huge steaks, and in the south you have the tapas and stuff, and I'm saying it in an American accent, tapas, but you
can say it in Spanish accent.
Nah, I can't go back and forth. That's one thing I can't do.
But if you want to go with only Spanish, go with only Spanish. That's fine.
But you know what? But they have really good food. Something really curious though is that I feel like hamburger restaurants in Spain are really amazing. I don't know.
Really?
Even better than here. The hamburger.
Are they better than Germany?
I don't know. No, I went to one hamburger restaurant in Hamburg, actually, and it was really, really good. Actually, that restaurant, the food was a little better. That was the coolest restaurant I've probably been. They had the screens that pop up out of the table and all this stuff. But
I don't think
it was called burger. I don't know what it was called. I forget what it was called. I'll look it up later. But in Hamburg, and it was it popped out of the table, and it was really cool. The bar area was really cool, and the burgers were really good. But in Spain, they have really, really good burgers, and they're really cheap too. And so I would, so if you go to Spain, I really recommend having a hamburger because they make huge. I don't know, they're really good.
I've never been big on hamburgers, but I guess I'll try that when I go to Spain now.
Yeah, it's good. And obviously,
I know Galician. Thanks to Spanish cuisine, that got me over my reluctance to eat octopus.
Right. Well, the octopus there is amazing.
My good friend took me to a Spanish restaurant in where was it? In Elizabethtown.
Yeah.
in Jersey, and that was the first time I tried. What's it called? What's it called in Spanish again?
Pulpo.
Pulpo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And since that day, my life has never been the same again. Every time I've eaten pulpo in Bolivian and
Yeah.
Peruvian and some other
Nothing you
places.
can do it. Yeah.
They're not the same. Spanish is number one.
Wait till you go there, because even in Spain, when I went, because I was living in Galicia like 2 months, a couple years, like 2 summers ago, working in like a summer camp with the kids and stuff, and we went to eat octopus, and it was like melt. We went to actually it was a festival of octopus.
Oh wow!
Where there was like, yeah, of course, like you're for eating octopus and stuff.
Wow.
And it wasn't, it was like a big, because like everything in Spain, it's a big, it was like a fiesta de pueblo, like a big party in the town and stuff, and it just happened to be centered around eating octopus.
Wow.
And so it was really delicious. It was like melting in your mouth good, which is octopus, like octopus melting in your mouth.
That sounds good.
It was delicious.
Wow, that's just, man.
Yeah. Basque Country also, San Sebastian. I would say, okay, San Sebastian maybe would beat New York City in terms of like restaurants. Because
Really?
like every restaurant is like the Michelin 5-star restaurant and stuff there. And like
Wow.
crazy good. They're like the best chefs or whatever. Like they're one of my favorite documentary was Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
And sadly,
he's my patron saint.
yeah. And so he loved San Sebastian and the Basque Country and stuff. So I mean that was one of the big things I was like really looking forward to go because I watched it was like No Reservations or whatever.
No reservation.
And he did an episode in San Sebastian, and I was like, oh man, I can't wait to go there, because I knew I was going to live in Pamplona, and it's like an hour away. And so the first trip I made was to go there, and the food is amazing. It's more expensive, unfortunately, but it's really, really good.
If
The quality is good.
If they can compete if they beat New York, then I think that, yeah.
They'll give New York a run for its money. It's a really like, also maybe one of the nicest cities I've been to. I would say like top 3 nicest cities I've ever been to. So
Well, when I used to be active on couch surfing,
yeah,
one of the first, no, I think they were the second or third people I hosted after moving to New York. They were from the Basque Country, 2 au pairs. One was in DC and one was in Boston. They were friends.
Yeah.
So they came to spend Christmas in New York. I think it was 2014
yeah.
Christmas. I actually brought them to the Real Madrid Peña. They didn't like it.
Of course not. The boss people, that's why they anti. That's like the most
said,
anti.
They said, they said, please make sure nobody takes a photo of us
No,
here."
never ever do that. No.
They were in the area and they texted me and they didn't realize that I was at the Real Madrid Peña, and they came there and they were like, please make sure nobody takes a photo. Don't post it on the internet. And I said, okay. But
You should know, like, if they're not Real Madrid fans, they hate Madrid.
yeah, I knew that they wouldn't like Real Madrid, but I didn't expect, like, they were just frowning.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you'd like to see some people who were no.
Yeah.
But they made as their part of the appreciation for they really like their stay at my place, and and they said for their appreciation they made calimocho for me.
Yeah.
And they said this is the real calimocho.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything fancy, but I enjoyed it.
No, it's definitely not
It's
for.
not-
It's not for fanciness.
Yeah,
it's
it's
for
not-
like drinking and getting drunk really cheap.
Yeah, because it was really and I was like, oh wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
So I remember them for that, and a few times, like when I make it for other people, they're like, "Oh wow, this is fancy." Like if I make it for them, my
Yeah.
American friends are like, "Oh wow, this is this. What's this?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Calimocho. It's not fancy. It's something."
Of course, yeah.
I learned from people from the Basque Country, like, "Oh, Spanish people." I said, "I don't think they would like."
They
being
do not.
called-
No.
Being called.
I dated a girl for a time that she wasn't from the Basque country. She was from Pamplona, but like in that area, they consider themselves Basque.
Okay.
And so, yeah, she really wasn't. She really did the same thing. Like, nope, because Real Madrid, Real Madrid is considered in Spain like if you like Real Madrid, usually you like Spain, and if you like Spain, you could be like really right wing or something like that. And so Basque is like completely the other side.
So I got to learn all that.
Yeah.
So before we officially dive into Spain, um, you went when you got into college, you were studying something else that was supposed to take you to a different part of the world.
Yeah.
So how did that, how did you get into that part, and what was that journey all about?
So I've always liked social sciences, and in high school, I was really good at history. I would always get like A's in histories, and from the European people who are going to listen, there's like tens, and so I would always get really high marks in history and social studies and stuff like that, and originally I was going to do computer science because I also did really well in computer science, but I got kind of bored by it after a while, so I was like, no. But I was always interested by history and stuff like that. So, and then I started to learn Japanese because we had to pick a language to learn, and I got super into Japanese. And growing up, I was always into anime and stuff like that, like every guy, like Dragon Ball Z or whatever. And so probably I liked it a little bit more than most. Not like crazy or anything like that. Like I wouldn't go to conventions or dress up or something, but I did like anime, and I started learning Japanese, and I got really into it. And I also started getting really high marks in Japanese, and was like, I'm gonna start studying Asian studies to learn about Asia and Asian history and geography in general. Obviously, Asia's really important to learn about in general. And you think Asia, China, and Japan and Korea, but obviously you also have to learn about India, Pakistan, and
there's a lot of countries there.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, a lot of history.
Taiwan and all the relations between them and all this stuff. And so my original plan was, I think I'm going to go live in Japan. And I was, of course, looking up like, how can I go live in Japan, teaching English? And so that was the original thing. And of course, that didn't happen. And, of course, I want to go visit someday, but I don't have the same feeling like I did when I was 18, 19. Like, I have to go to Japan. It's so cool and stuff. But yeah, of course, I got to learn a lot about geography. And of course, a lot of classes weren't only about Asia, just about in general in the world politics, world history, and stuff like that. And so I think it was actually a really good amount of it was world geography and world history and politics, and then the other part of it was Asia and Asian theology and stuff, like learning about Sikhism and Hinduism and all that stuff. Yeah, so all of it was super, super, super informative and a lot of stuff because obviously, Asia's, even a country like India is super complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And then to learn about like India, Pakistan, Vietnam, all that stuff is a lot of information to go by. So, so really my plan was to go to Japan and travel around Asia for a while, and then, what the hell after that, But then eventually I ended up in Spain.
Which is very far from Asia.
Yeah.
Not too far from Asia, but still far.
Somewhere like it's not halfway. So so that's what happened.
Wow. Have you ever heard of the channel Black Experience Japan?
No.
It's a YouTube channel. I think you should check it out. You probably like it.
It's about black people who live in Japan.
Yeah, it started out as interviewing black people who live in Japan. It's a black couple who, it's a black guy, but his wife sometimes appears on it. They migrated from Jamaica to Canada and then to Japan, and he started meeting professionals who migrated to Japan. And just watching that was like, sometimes I feel like I probably, if I had been stationed in Japan when I wanted to be stationed in Japan, I probably would have stayed a little bit longer in the Navy.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have ended up in New York. I probably would have stayed in Japan too.
Right.
Because there are people who, a lot of the guys, even some of the girls, there's one who, I follow a bunch of them after watching their episodes, the ones who give their Instagram accounts. I follow a lot of them on Instagram, and they like they started watching anime,
Yeah.
and some of them learned Japanese from that. After they got during college, they took a class, and some came to Japan and had an internship. Others just after college that I gotta come here.
Yeah.
Some it was the military that brought them, like the Americans. The military brought them there, and that was it. They said, I ain't coming back.
Right.
But it's interesting, both the Americans, the Caribbeans, the Africans, and it's like their whole experience when they start talking about Japan.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
So,
I have watched a lot of like those YouTube videos, and I remember I was also like 18, 19. There was like one or two people I used to just follow all the time that they would just describe what life was like in Japan. Not on a like race level or anything like that, but just like, oh yeah, well, the toilets flush this way or whatever.
Oh yeah,
and things
I know
that.
people like that too. Who, yeah.
So I used to be interested by that.
Why I've always mentioned this channel, it's a fellow black person talking to other black people, and excuse me, like they even have multiracial black people there, so you get that perspective also, and so you get to hear about the racial, the comparison of racism and all that from wherever they're coming from, and so it's I always recommend it. I've actually interviewed one person who's appeared on that channel on my podcast.
Right.
He's an ex-military guy.
Yeah.
And so it's I prefer it to most of the other channels. Like, if it's no offense to white people, but like, experience is always it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, of course.
But when it's a black person who, half Japanese, half black, when they talk about their experience in Japan, and I'm like, okay, I'll listen to you, and I'll definitely hear what they're talking about. And then now the guy, he started going to like South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Vietnam version, Singapore. They have been very eye-opening, and opened my eyes to a whole lot of things happening. Even the Chinese version, because people here tend to have one picture about China.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's wrong. I've known a lot about what's happening in China for a while.
Yeah.
But when you hear black persons living in China, doing his own thing, telling you what's going on there, and then it becomes, you come out of that bubble.
Right.
And then you start seeing from this person's perspective, and you're like, okay. And then you hear someone living in South Korea telling you about theirs, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I always recommend that channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
So now you ended up in Spain. So how did you officially begin in Spain? How did you arrive in Spain?
Right. So as I met a girl, of course, in New York, and she's Spanish. And besides that, and you know me that I really like football. And so one thing was that I got I started following footballers on football soccer. I started following footballers on I want to say in Spanish on social media.
Yeah.
I want to follow them on social media. I started following them on social media, and it was like, wow, man, they're in Ibiza or they're in Mallorca. This looks so cool, whatever. And Spain looks so nice and whatever. And I went there with my father in 2015, right after I graduated, because he was like, all right, Chris, I'm going to take you because I know you want to go, as a gift for graduating college.
Okay.
And I remember my dad's really protective of me, and I bought tickets to go see this girl, and I just told my dad I'm gonna go to Spain in a couple of weeks, and, and he was like, what? No, you never left the country without, we went to Puerto Rico and whatever, but when I was younger with my mom and whatever, and he's like, oh no, I'll go with you in a couple months.
There was always family every time you left.
And he's like, I'm gonna go with you and whatever, because you never been to Europe and whatever. And I'm like, I got really pissed off, but whatever. I went and then so he took me a few months later in March, and I think 80% of the time I was just with the girl, and
what city did you go to?
Madrid. I went to Madrid.
Okay.
And so Yes, I was in Madrid, and then
Was she a Madrid fan?
no,
Oh,
nope. She was not. She was a Barcelona fan.
oh. So you're the second person I know from New York who moved to. Well, his first time in Spain
Yeah.
was he just literally moved. He met a Spanish. He met a Spanish girl. He wasn't truly a fan. You probably met him, by the way, because he was one of the founding members of the Real Madrid Peña, but
Okay.
he's not a Madrid fan.
Okay.
And he followed this lady to Spain
Uh.
without being a soccer fan,
Okay.
but he loved Ronaldo.
Right.
And she was, she was a Valencia fan. I think that's probably how he became. Well, he was already liking Valencia, but
Yeah.
he's attached to Brazil. So
Yeah.
Ronaldo, Brazil,
Right.
Ronaldo was his number one. So he was also his bias for Real Madrid was
Yeah.
there because Ronaldo was playing for Real Madrid. So he was
Right.
like with both teams.
Right.
So she broke up with him while he was.
Really?
I was like, but he followed you from
Really?
from New
Oh,
York
man.
to Spain.
That's rough.
That was it. No, how dare you like a Real Madrid player? Why are you leaving my house? Get out.
Really?
He laughs about it when
Yeah.
he tells the story.
Yeah. Man, Spanish girls make you do a lot of stuff. You could go like you cross the ocean for them. And obviously, that means Latina girls too. But I mean Spain Spanish because and that's the thing we do here. Like, oh, you're Spanish, but it could be Colombian or whatever for like New Yorkers that listen. But obviously, when I mean Spanish, I mean Spain in this case. And so I went there, and I always like working in schools. Like I told you, I worked in the school with the deaf children and stuff. So I was like, what's the way to go live in Spain? Be a teacher. But it's not teaching. It's like language assistant and whatever, and you're like an assistant in a school. So I went and I just found this program that finds people from America and gets them a student visa, and to do like a course for teaching English while you're in the school and stuff. Like it's like a weird trick they do. And so I gotta tell you, like it is like a really shady business actually, like teaching English in Spain. So I ended up finding one, like, because it was really late in the process. Really, I found the school like in August. And so it's really late in the process. I'm like, oh, whatever, just take whatever. And it was like in a little town south of Pamplona. So I lived in Pamplona, but the school was about 25 miles south, and about in like a little town, not like that little, it was like 10,000 people.
Okay.
And so I ended up working in that place for 2 years. Obviously the plan was like, all right, I'll go 1 year, and then the next year I'll go try to be in Madrid or whatever. Eventually me and the girl just stopped seeing each other, and part of it was distance, part of it was I was like alone for I was living at home during college, so I'm like, okay, I want to be independent and all this stuff. And she also left and she moved to London. So it was a bit just like, okay, we both want to be independent actually. And I was like, all right, yeah, cool. But I was really enjoying my time in Pamplona. I made a lot of friends. I realized I didn't want to move to Madrid, and that was always like the dream. But then I realized like, I really love Pamplona. Navarra is the, and I'm saying it wrong because it's, or Navarre in English, it's the region in Spain where Pamplona is. And I really loved it, and I loved the school I worked in, and I was like definitely a disaster my first year. I had no idea what I was doing, like, and they had so much patience with me. Like, I have to say, it's called Tafalla. I don't know if I said that before, but the town is called Tafalla, and I worked in the school, and I would give any of these people my kidney because they were, if they asked me for it or whatever I needed to give them, I would give it to them because they gave me everything. All the students, I had a great relationship with them. I still have a great relationship with them. I have a great relationship with my coworkers that I worked with. and I did trips with them like to Barcelona or whatever, and I probably shouldn't have because I wasn't like a teacher.
Wow.
And so but they were like,
they helped you integrate.
Yeah, they
properly.
really, and
That's
they
good.
taught me so much about Basque culture and everything, and they integrated me really, really well.
That's beautiful.
And yeah, I probably would not have had the same experience if I didn't end up there.
Wow.
That's for sure.
So that's good. I can see why you fell in love with was it Navarre region?
Yeah.
Navarre region.
So yeah, in English you say Navarre, but
Navarre.
in Spanish it's Navarra.
Navarre.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the classes I took in college was something about Spain. I'm trying to remember. Was it? I think it was. I can't remember. I can't recall. It was Spanish. Something about Spain, but I had to write. I had to pick a region of Spain to write about, and I think I wrote about Extremadura.
Extremadura.
Extremadura, yeah.
Right. It's interesting.
Close.
It's a really random one,
so,
actually.
that was the region, the area I wrote about.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I remember, I recall seeing Pamplona, Navarre, because I reading the profile the professor gave me, and then I saw Pamplona was in there, and I read some interesting stuff, but I just Extremadura spoke to me, and that's why I ended up writing about.
Yeah.
So
that's
that
cool.
was
I've been there. It's it's near Seville. So it's like it's on the now I live in Andalusia. And Extremadura is just the region right above it.
Yeah. So when so this question might either work with when you arrived the first time with your dad, or when you arrived in the Navarre region for work. But what will you consider your first culture shock in Spain?
Okay.
And in what city?
I would say in Madrid, I wouldn't say when I was in Madrid the first time, it wasn't like a huge culture shock, except for, okay, I thought, well, the alcohol is so cheap here. And I wouldn't even say these were shocks, but I was like, well, the alcohol is so cheap. I think that's what kind of made me want to move there even more. I was like, what? Like $1 beer, holy shit. And I remember someone took me to a Real Madrid game.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, people are smoking cigarettes. Everyone was smoking cigarettes. I'm like, I never seen this many people smoke cigarettes all at once. Like,
so they're still smoking in the stadium?
Yeah, they do in the stadium, but not just in the stadium, but in the street, everyone's smoking cigarettes.
Oh,
and
so
I was like,
the kind of image you get from like 50s movies.
Yeah, something like that. Everyone's smoking. I never realized that many people, I never been in a place where that many people were smoking.
Wow.
And I remember my nose was bleeding, and then it was just mad which is crazy to even think about, because now I've been living there. I occasionally smoke sometimes or whatever, cigarettes and hookah. I remember before I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna smoke. That typical, like on the TV you see those commercials all the time. I wouldn't recommend smoking, obviously. I'm not gonna recommend smoking, but it's kind of drilled in your head here in America with the anti-tobacco stuff, and then there isn't. You buy the pack of cigarettes, but there's like smoking kills. And it'd be like a really weird image of either like really grotesque or like a baby smoking a cigarette or something like that. And that's
on
it.
their cigarettes.
Yeah, on the cigarette box. Wow. Like the warning or whatever. But there it's pretty normal to smoke. I mean, I think and they live longer, so whatever. But
they eat healthy, so
that's the thing. Yeah, they're active and healthy. But the really big culture shock was probably I arrived in Pamplona. I remember it was the 24th of September, and then obviously Pamplona is really famous for the running of the bulls.
Yes.
And so the party's called San Fermin, or Los Sanfermines. And so there's a little party in September, at the end of September, called San Fermin Chiquito, which is like Little San Fermin. And it's not, obviously, San Fermin with the bulls is like millions of people coming and like a huge uncontrollable party for 1 week straight. This is just for one day, and it's just like all the people in Pamplona go out in the street and drink, and And obviously, here, if that happened, every police would come and just beat the shit out of you. So, it was just everyone in the street and concerts and music and people smoking and drinking. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And then all like a big thing, Pamplona is not a really big city. It's a bit less than under 200,000 people. And so, like, there's the center, the historical center. I mean, you know, you've been to Europe and you're, you know, used to seeing like little, you know, the historical parts of cities. And so it's like the little streets and everything. And so in Pamplona, they're all bars with like the pincho bars and stuff, which is like the tapa in the north.
Okay.
It's a little different. Okay, if I'm saying I have to say it's different because my friends in Seville would be like, oh, it's not the same as tapas. I know. But they have the bars, and then what they do is on Saturday nights and stuff, they just take out all the chairs and tables and then put on like a disco light or, you know, like a flashing light, and then it just becomes like this little nightclub.
Oh.
And so like so it's the first time I seen anything like that, and just all the bars were like that, and everyone was outside drinking and peeing in the street and stuff, and I was like, whoa, man, this is amazing. And then everyone got home, you know, people don't go home there until like 6 or 7 in the morning and stuff, and I was like, whoa, this is so cool. I was lucky I had 2 flatmates and one took me into his group of friends, so I was lucky I got to integrate really quick.
Okay.
I made a really good friend of mine from England. His name is James, and he was like, yeah, make up. And he couldn't speak like any Spanish, so he was really excited he had someone to speak English with.
Okay. So now that you've mentioned disco, I forgot to ask this question earlier. Music,
right?
Where does your favorite music come from? What when it comes to music, where do you see yourself attaching to, or where do you belong to when it comes to your favorite music?
Right. I know it's hard because I know like the worst answer is like, oh, I listen to everything, but I don't know. It's I really like electronic music, stuff that I can go home and listen to, like electronic music. I also like classic rock. I'm a huge Beatles fan because of my dad. He was, and then, you know, eventually got with me. I've stuck with it, and I do like hip hop, 2000s hip hop and stuff, like Nas, Jay-Z, you know, people, you know, these type of rappers, especially Nas. And yeah, of course, but also like, you know, as I got older, I became big on the electronic music like Avicii and Calvin Harris, and yeah, so those are things I typically like. And now obviously I'm really into Latino music more because in Spain everything is Latino music. Either it's like pop like Shakira or something, but then they have like reggaeton, but that's more for the night out, like when you're outside, you know, when you're out and stuff in the discoteca. It's like you have to listen to reggaeton, which sometimes can be annoying, but sometimes it's really cool to dance to. But it's really cool to dance to.
Favorite artist from reggaeton, or
I guess reggaeton. I don't know. I would say
you just go with the flow.
I go with the flow, but I like. There's a couple like Ozuna, who's from Puerto Rico, and then, you know, I guess like the big famous one right now is Bad Bunny.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Bad Bunny.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they.
I liked his interview on Playboy.
Yeah, I didn't.
Was it Playboy or Cosmopolitan?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah,
he was crossing me. He touched on sexuality and he broke the stereotypes that the males, especially like Latinos, don't usually seem to want to talk about when it comes to sexuality and male figures, male celebrities. Yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah, he's okay. He's pretty good. I always like, I always think like all the lyrics kind of suck in reggaeton because it's just like garbage. But it's
tell me, we have that in African hip hop too.
Yeah, it's all.
By the way, they play up the African pop music that they call Afrobeats now? Is it?
I
someone
heard
over
there
there
was
too?
one song that was really famous. It was like called Shikini. It was like something like that, and it was really really big in Spain for like last year.
Last
And
year.
they would just play it in the disco, and it would be
Mm.
it was called like Shikini Shikini, and it was really
I think
big.
I know the song. Davido.
Maybe I can't remember.
It's Davido.
They did
I
like 6 languages in one song or something like that. I don't know.
I think it's David. That what you just sound. The sound you made, it sounded like Davido.
It could be.
Yeah, it's I can't even. It's playing my bad. I'm trying to recall the title of the song,
Yeah.
but it's a party type of. It sounds reggaetonish.
Yeah.
It sounds something similar to. I think he may have done something with somebody from one of the reggaeton artists. A bunch of them have started reggaeton, and some of Nigerian artists have done some collabs, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But I just thought about it like, yeah, no, I'm wondering like, yeah, why wouldn't Spanish music scene have one or two Nigerian?
There's a
songs?
lot. There's a lot of immigration from Africa
Oh,
to
yeah.
Spain. So I see nowadays, which
Wait, before it became big news, now I knew someone who told me about who he went through the route back in the days. Like
Yeah.
I met him 2003, and he told me of how he went crossed through the desert
yeah,
into Morocco, the part where he could swim
Yeah.
across through into Spain.
yeah,
And the Moroccans took him across and swam.
yeah.
He told me that experience and how they did it, and I was like, "What on earth?"
Yeah, it must be
And,
crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
It is. It is like. I mean, that's where typically they would. Well, there in Italy are like the places where they try to get it. It's just really difficult for Africans to get from.
Yeah,
there
Italy Italy wasn't even booming then, because at first it was Spain. Spain was usually the booming spot for a long time,
Yeah.
and then Italy. Then they will find it like my part of Nigeria where I
Yeah.
grew up. Then they will find their way into Italy.
Yeah.
And then because there's a huge human trafficking spot in
Yeah,
Italy.
yeah.
Italy
Yeah.
was a lot more
Yeah.
easier to settle in,
Yeah.
but Spain was the entry, and then you disappear from Spain.
Right.
Yeah. So, I have to ask. So you were in Spain. You were in Seville during the lockdown,
Yeah.
and what was it like over there?
Well, it sucked. I think it sucked everywhere, you know. But it was just, you know, I had traveled like right before the lockdown. Like we had like a long weekend. It was, yeah, like February the numbers started going up, or you could see like in Italy, all the numbers just started going
Yeah.
up like crazy, and everyone was like, "Whoa, man, Italy's like messed up." And obviously, no one thought like, "Oh, it's gonna happen in Spain now too." And then all of a sudden, boom, just it started going up like crazy, and you know, eventually people started wearing masks. And so I had a long weekend, so I got a flight from Seville to Pamplona. It was like it was the end of February, the first weekend of March, so like 2 weeks before the lockdown happened, and so we had to do a layover in Madrid, and it was like the most depressing airport stop I've ever made in my life, because everyone was wearing masks and trying to stay away from each other, or you know, things like this. And obviously at that point no one was used to wearing masks or whatever, you know, or no one was like understanding what was going on, and just like, this looks like pretty scary, just like everyone's worried that this, you know, they're gonna get the virus now or whatever.
Yeah.
It could have happened. I wouldn't be surprised if I got it in that moment, because it was just like a whole flight from Italy just walking through to us, and it was just like, okay, yeah. And so I went there, and I went back to Seville, and so after 2 weeks, the numbers kept going up, and then the president just goes on TV and he's like, "Yeah, we're in."
Prime Minister.
The prime minister, sorry, yeah, messed up. The prime minister said, "Yeah, Spain's in a state of alarm," and all this stuff, and then just the next day we had to stay inside, and it's like you can't go outside unless we couldn't go outside unless we were going to the supermarket, to the ATM, to a pharmacy, obviously like a medical emergency, or to get cigarettes. So that was it. Those are the only reasons you can go outside. And so it was rough, and it was just, it was like the weather was so good, and you're just like, okay, I want to go out. We had like a terrace upstairs, and in the first couple months we tried to go up, but then like the presidents of, you're not really allowed because it wasn't just ours, it was the common.
Yeah, for the building.
And so eventually they said, oh yeah, well, you can't go up here and blah blah blah, and that made it like worse, because then they just kept complaining about it. I guess they're right. But yeah, so I just tried to stay in as much as I could. In the beginning, it wasn't like I wasn't trying to leave the house, but I never was good at like planning what to buy at the supermarket. So I would go, and then 3 days later, I need this, so I would go out again. And then
so you didn't go with the list.
Yeah, so I live with two roommates who really amazing girls who are really, they were going to be really good friends, and so they made it a lot easier during the lockdown. But obviously it was still difficult because you're just inside all the time, and you're just seeing the same two people all the time, and it's like, all right, get the fuck away from me. And so and I just didn't, I couldn't think of like, all right, what am I gonna do? Do I go back to New York forever now? Like, do I stay in Spain because this really sucks? Like, what am I gonna, things like that. And because technically at that time I was like trying to work out my visa situation, and what was happening was like my academy was just, still paying me, but like under the table, because I couldn't, I still didn't have the visa, my work visa, which I was trying to change a student visa to work visa, and all this crazy bureaucratic stuff. Yeah, which just gave me more stress and everything. And I'm like, like, I'm here, I'm not really supposed to be making this money, I'm not getting like help from the government because I'm technically shouldn't be here yet, and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh man, should I go back? I should just go back to New York and all this stuff. But eventually I thought like, oh, I think I should just stay, and I'll get to that later. But obviously during the lockdown, it really wasn't easy. The only thing that made it easier was I had two roommates to talk with all the time, and when I needed someone, and they helped a lot. And I remember like I got yelled at because one of them's from Spain, the other one's from New Zealand. Okay. And the one from Spain is all right, just in case I'm just gonna listen, and then I don't want to use these words, but like a little bit more like motherly. Yeah. And so she would just come down on me when I was like when I was going out a little bit too much, and she was like, whatever, or like, oh Chris, you gotta clean, I'm like, okay, she's definitely just stressed out too, and all this stuff, and she's just whatever. So I was like, like trying, like calming myself down and all this stuff, and like, seeing it from her point of view. But it was like, oh, come on, like that. And I'm just like, I just need to get out. And luckily, I think everyone behaved more or less and stayed inside. Yeah. Did their part. When we started to go out, people were wearing the masks and everything. And as like we had these phases that you see now here, by the time I left Spain, the phases were over. And so because everyone wore the mask and everything. The thing is, now it's going up again because people are like, oh yeah, summertime, screw it, and at the beach and want to go out. So it's starting to go up a bit again, and now they're starting to like bring back closing things down there and stuff. And which of course, because it hasn't gone away. So so it really wasn't easy. And I think in the beginning it was definitely stressful for my parents too, because before it hit here, it was like, maybe you should come back because here it's not bad. And I'm like, it's gonna get there, because just one person goes on the subway here, of course it's gonna go everywhere.
Our mutual friend who passed away,
of course, Nevi, I saw that, and it was that was rough too. I saw that, and I was like, I gave him some money, and I thought like, okay, it's gonna get better, because I was reading all like the updates, like, whatever.
We thought it was better,
and then eventually passed.
Unfortunately passed away.
So and I think I was looking at it from afar in like horror, because I was like, okay, here it's getting better, and everyone's doing it. And I'm like, but why is no one, like Like in New York, yeah, but of course New York got hit really hard because it's New York City and it's so densely packed, and there's this metro that goes, the subway that goes everywhere, and so of course. But then you see later like people in Florida doing whatever they want, and you're just like, what are they doing? And even now still. So
I mean, it begins at the top. If you have in Spain, the prime minister didn't come out and say it's a hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, in Germany, the chancellor didn't say it was a hoax.
Yeah.
In Italy, the prime minister didn't say it was a hoax. And you could see that's why they got better. It went down to a stage where they could say, okay, we could restart. But
deep down, these guys like in Italy or Spain, they must love Trump because it's not like because maybe they didn't, especially in the beginning, you could like throw criticism at them and stuff like, oh, you closed too late.
Yeah.
But now it's so bad. Trump, this is handling it so bad here that they must love like, oh yeah, well at least we're not America.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Because but everybody's looking at them now and saying, you guys did a fantastic job. I remember that video that was on Twitter of Italian mayors going around shouting at Italians who were on the streets, who like refused to be indoors, and mayors were like pleading with them, like, why are you outside? Why are you not inside? Please, people are dying, and all that. And people were making fun of the videos on Twitter. I remember seeing those videos, and then look at the casualties we have in the United States right now. You look at the time frame from when that video went up to now.
Yeah.
How many people have died?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It became this big political weapon. I mean, it's both of it. They don't even care. It's just, even both sides, I think, even Democrat.
Nah, I don't buy that, because
not that they don't care, but they will close. It's not about it's definitely not like, I think if a Democrat was in charge, it wouldn't be like this, and it would be okay. But they're not thinking about, okay, maybe we should open. Democrats will close it. Are closing everything, whether it's in a county or a town where there's not really much virus. It's closed. Or obviously in a big city, it should be closed, and they close it, which is good. And the Republicans just want to keep everything open, so no matter what. And it's just like, what? It shouldn't be.
The point
political.
still boils down to, we had a team that could have,
of course, that too,
nipped this in the bud, because this is not something that they couldn't have handled. I mean, for all the criticism China was hit with, and rightfully, they still were able to bring it down.
Yeah.
Because if China didn't bring it down, the numbers of casualty would have been quadrupled by now.
Yeah, of course.
So they still brought it down, no matter how we want to look at it. So there's something to learn there.
Yeah. So of course, it comes from Trump. It's his fault. I mean, it's just insanity.
But the fact that it took him how many months, and he's only worn a mask once, and it was just for a stunt. I mean, that just says it all. And you have governors like the guy in Georgia suing mayors who are trying to say, who are making it mandatory to wear masks in their city. He's suing them.
It's insane.
And he's saying, people won't wear masks because people don't obey the law. I'm like, why would you even say that? You're a governor of a state. And you're saying people won't obey. There are laws that we should wear clothes, right? We shouldn't walk around naked.
Yeah.
Some people don't obey the law and they arrest you, right?
Yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah.
So why would you come out and say it's not everybody obeys the law to wear masks?
So it was all these things, and then later on we had the George Floyd, and I was like in Spain too, and just people were like, "What the hell?" And
what was that like in your part of Spain?
I mean, everyone just was like, "What the?" Everyone, of course, it was a natural reaction to besides there's the racism element and stuff, but I think people, especially now in Europe and the last few years with Trump, understand that there's this big racism element, and there's racism in Spain and like big ignorance or racism in Europe or whatever. But it's not the same. But it's not the same.
I saw like the fascism and the people trying to glorify Franco recently in Spain, like doing that, and
Yeah.
and I've like some people like ask me like as if I've not been watching Real Madrid games recently. I said I've been watching. I was celebrated
Yeah.
in private when Barcelona lost to Osasuna, but
Yeah.
the fact that I saw some Real Madrid fans trying to be like, oh, it's not a big deal over the George Floyd or Goya, trying to
Yeah.
put those messages on Facebook. I said, I don't need to be out there celebrating with
Yeah.
y'all. So I intentionally stopped talking about Real Madrid or talked about football
Yeah.
since the games came back, and I
So-
focused on only talking about the issues that matter. You all want to talk about football, then go ahead and talk about it. I'm not going to put myself there. I don't include myself
Yeah.
because my life does not matter to people like that.
Yeah.
And that's why people like wonder about why is he not talking about football anymore.
Yeah.
I said I don't need to.
Yeah.
And I've seen where you stand when it comes, because they'll be like, oh, we care about you. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Because if something happens to me or my daughter, then you're going to pretend that you care. So yeah, I'm not going to waste my time. So
Exactly.
in private, I celebrated, but
Yeah.
I didn't celebrate in public.
Yeah.
That's the stance. But anyway, we have to
Yeah.
wrap it up. We've
No
gone.
problem.
We should do a part 2 when you return back to Spain. Are you still going back?
So yeah, my plan is to do a master of international relations in Spain.
Okay.
So this is my plan. I'll know in the next couple of weeks if I get in, and then we have
in the same region.
yeah. So I applied for a few universities in the south, in Andalusia, in that region, and then one university in Barcelona. And so I know in the next week and a half, 2 weeks, I'll know if I get in. And
All right.
So
I hope you do.
that's my plan. And so everyone in the world's like, oh, you're going to get in. Don't worry. So, but hopefully that's true.
I believe you will.
Yeah, so that's my plan. So I'll be in Spain for at least 1 more year, and then I have to think about if I'm going to stay. If maybe I'll come back here or whatever. I really want to study though and do this master, and yeah. So that's the plan for now. And obviously to be back in Seville, I have really good friends in Seville.
Yeah.
I have a really good group of friends in Seville.
Okay.
I met a girl recently. Hi, Raquel. And so we'll see what happens.
Raquel, I love that. It sounds like my name too.
And so we'll see. So I told her I would give her a shout out. So
Hello, Raquel.
yeah.
I'm gonna give you a shout out too.
And so yeah. So we'll see what happens in the future. But definitely the plan is to go back and study. So that's it. Yeah, we'll be back in Seville.
Alrighty. So I think that's a good place to end. Final question. What would you like to leave the audience with as maybe it could be a word of advice or just a final thing you would like to leave the audience with? Could be a quote, could be a mantra that you live by, could be a line from your favorite book or song or just something.
Sure. So I don't have a quote or anything, but I would say to everyone, especially when this thing is over, I think everyone should realize that life is really, and not anything can happen in life. You can see this whole thing, this whole thing should show you that in one moment you can lose your job, in one moment you can get sick. So you should get out there and travel. Everyone wants to talk about traveling and whatever, but then they get a bit scared and like, oh, but I have to work and all this stuff. If you have the opportunity, you should go and do it. And that's what I decided to do 5 years ago, and it was definitely the best decision of my life by far. And maybe I haven't bought my own house yet or anything like that, but it's definitely been worth it to travel. And if you are interested in travel and stuff like that, I do have a Instagram account dedicated to photography and where I go, and I will be trying to upload more content like videos and stuff like this as I do my travels when I get back to Europe or whatever it is, okay? And the account is called Life of a Giri, and Giri is spelled Guiri. If you don't know what Giri is, it's what these Spanish people call North Americans and Northern European people. So
Spell that again.
Life of a Giri. So Giri is Guiri.
Oh, I would have thought that was Japanese.
No, giri. Yeah, it sounds like it, right?
Yeah.
But now giri is like it's like gringo, but for
Yeah.
Spanish people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so gringo is not from Spain. Okay.
Yeah, gringo is like the Mexican
The
word, and
Mexican,
then
yes.
and in Spain they say guiris.
Giris.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. Nice. I normally, after the final question, I normally ask for plugins, but
I already did it. Yeah, there you
did
go.
that, so.
Yeah.
All right. So beautiful. So once again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to everyone who joined us for this episode. Feel free to check out our other episodes and follow us on social media. And go on iTunes, give us a 5-star, and share with your friends, and write awesome reviews for us. And keep coming and check out the next episode. All right. So thanks again, and looking forward to see you all at the next episode.
All right, thank
And
you.
thank you for the privilege of your company. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoyed the show, we'll appreciate if you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. If you have any questions, comments, or have someone who will be a good guest on the show, or you want to be on the show, send us a message at whitelabelamerican@gmail.com. And make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at White Label American. Thank you for your support.